be a good sort, setting up good recycling practices. So we're really happy to have Jo back with us presenting these workshops. So I'll hand over to Jo. I'll just keep letting people in.
Fantastic. Thanks, Gabby. And thanks so much for all of you who are joining us at this particularly tricky time to talk about something which seems probably pretty benign in the grand scheme of things. But hopefully it gives us something practical to focus on today. And it is pretty simple stuff, really, but it is the sort of stuff that gets me excited. So, you know, let's get stuck in and hopefully you learn a few things today, which helps you at home as well. We are recording today's sessions. I have enabled a live transcription, which I hope is as accurate as it can be. We are recording the session, and if you don't wish to be recorded, don't worry, it's not going to be, it'll be my picture and my face and my voice and the slides. So today we are talking all about recycling and what being a good sort or good recycler is all about. There's lots of opportunities to ask questions. You don't have to wait till the end. Please throw them in the chat box and we will get to those throughout the sessions. If not during the session, definitely I'll have them there, but please ask them as you go because often we can't remember them when we get back to it. I'd like to acknowledge that I, like probably many of you, am on the land of the Wallumattagal today, on the edge of the Eora and Darug Nations. I'm in North Ryde, not far away. But far enough away to probably not be able to go to your neck of the woods. So thank you again for joining us in this particularly challenging time. My name's Jo Taranto and I am the founder of Good for the Hood, which is a community education organisation. We provide all sorts of environmental and social education around sustainability, around being a good citizen, and how to step up into that next space and really take on those few extra things which help us be better community members and citizens of the planet. So I've been involved in this work for nearly 5 years now. I've done a lot of work around the Hunters Hill and Ryde communities, and I think we have pretty beautiful hoods, neighbourhoods, communities, clubs, organisations, and you know, I think we're founded on a lot of really wonderful things. So today is about capitalising on those, stepping up a little bit more our game and getting some of those behaviours which will help us be you know, a better part of our communities and our great systems that we have. So today is a little bit of theory, a few tips and a few questions, and I really hope I don't overwhelm or burden you or bore you. Because I think this is often far more complex than it needs to be. And really, I just want this to be something that you've walked away with a simpler version of perhaps some of the things we sometimes get told, because the more you fall into learning about this space, the more overwhelming it can sometimes seem. And I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. So today is about some simple tips about making recycling as easy as possible for you in your home. Whenever we talk about waste, we absolutely talk about the waste hierarchy, because we really want people to understand that recycling is not the be all and end all. We don't want you to focus purely on recycling. We don't want you to just think about how you can get rid of the stuff you create. Ultimately, we would love you to create less. So please always think in the back of your mind, has the waste that I created, was it essential? Did I have to create it in that way? Was there a way I could have created less waste by doing something different? And ultimately, if you do need to then recycle an item, how can you do that in the best possible way? I will say that in Australia, we have pretty sophisticated waste systems compared to a lot of the world. It's not perfect by any means, and it creates a lot of its own challenges and logistical issues itself. But we are very lucky to have good waste systems. Countries with poor waste systems, it's very obvious. You have heavily polluted waterways, you have litter on the streets, you have waste building up into areas, and you have toxic environmental issues. We're really lucky in Australia that the days of that are not completely gone, but they're certainly much, much better than we've ever seen. Anyone who's lived on our beautiful waterways throughout the 60s, 70s, you know, and even 80s would recognize that we've come a long way with how we manage toxic, you know, issues in our communities. And a lot of that has to do with setting up good systems and creating environments where we can manage waste and pollutants properly. That requires us as citizens to step up a little bit differently too. And over the years, we've had to engage in different behaviours, different systems, and we've got different bins in our households. So we've had to learn how to be better waste recyclers. And that has come with a burden on us, really. And not all of us have always fully understood what that means. And we're going to talk a little bit now about why we think we're pretty good recyclers in Australia and whether that's actually true or not. So I'm going to launch a poll now and get you to think about what percentage of items that we put in our recycling bins, and if you're in Hunters Hill, that's a yellow or blue bin, what percentage of that waste is ending up in landfill at the moment. So I'm just going to launch that. Oop, I'm going to try not to go backwards. And I want you to let me know what you think. Is it 5, 15, 30, 50 or 90% of what we put in our recycling bins is going to landfill because of sorting errors, because we're putting it in the wrong bin? All right, we've got a few bits of data coming in. Brilliant. All right, I'm going to finish that poll any second. Okay. All right. So most of you think about a third to about half of our waste that we're putting in our bins is ending up in landfill, and you're not far off. So about 30 to 35% of our waste is ending up in landfill because we put it in the wrong bin when it comes to recyclables, which is problematic because when you think about the effort and the energy that goes into putting something out on the street, being collected, being sorted at the materials recycling facility, then it ends up going where we could have just put it in the red bin in the first place. It's a very wasteful activity and ultimately very discouraging for us as citizens because we feel like we've done the right thing, but actually we've created some problems along the way. So we want to avoid that from happening, which is what today's session is all about. And I'm going to run another poll now and ask you, what percentage of Australians you think are actually really good at this? So how many of us are getting it right, you know, almost 100% of the time? Because we know that most Australians, about 90% of us, think that recycling is really important. And about 74% of us think we're really good at it. So most of us go recycling, nailing it. When in actual fact, we may be looking at a different story. So I want to know, what percentage do you think are actually good at recycling when it comes to the research that Cleanaway have done most recently about recycling behaviours? So is it 15, 25, 50, 75 or 99% are really good at this? So getting it every time. If we'll go and do a bin audit today, they get the big green tick. All right, fantastic. So most of you have said that they think about 50% of us are pretty good at it, good at recycling. Unfortunately, it's quite a bit less than that. So only about a quarter of us, so 25% of us are actually getting it right. And sometimes we don't really know. So again, today is all about making sure that we are getting our sorting right, because being a good recycler ultimately is about sorting the items we have correctly. It comes back to being as simple as that. So when we talk about some of the biggest issues we have with recycling, 50% of us are still putting our soft plastic bags in our recycling bins, in our yellow bins in particular, which is the biggest challenge we see for recycling in Australia. So hopefully today, if nothing else, you will recognise that plastic bags like this have no place in our recycling bins, and we will explain why in a second. So recycling is a system of collecting resources for as commodities. So really it is about taking a mix of items, sorting them our end, so that, and then putting them in the right bin so they can go in the right truck to the right facility, be sorted again, and then processed. It is not a particularly complex system when you recognize that really, just like putting a bunch of kids' toys away, it's making sure that they go in the right bucket or the right room of your house, or like when you unpack the dishwasher, that the cutlery goes in the right drawer. So it is just a process of sorting it into the right places so that it has the best possible chance of going to the right facility and in the right, then can be remanufactured appropriately. Now, because of the scale of what we put in our bins and the number of people in our cities and the amount of waste that comes in through a recycling facility and the cost to do that, it isn't a perfect system. So the way that our resource recovery is designed is for getting as much through the system as possible so that we can capture the commodities which have value and that they can go back into a system that is financially worth it. So you can imagine we could spend hours and hours and hours getting the best possible system and working it all out, but it may not be financially viable. And at the end of the day, citizens like you and I, we pay for these systems. And so it needs to be financially viable. And we also need to get the best outcome at the other end. So if you ever get to go to a recycling facility, you will kind of be blown away by the scale of what's coming through those systems. You only need to look at what you put out on the street each week or fortnight and multiply that by millions of people to know that we have a lot of waste. And therefore, we also have a lot of contaminants that can end up in there. So our systems revolve around a lot of moving parts. So when the bin goes into the truck and then the truck takes it to the facility, it really is a system of pulling those items out and sorting it into a stream, a waste stream that can then go through to the next manufacturer who can remanufacture it and put it back in the supply chain to make another product. Now, when it comes to recycling, it's not always one for one. We don't always take a glass bottle and make a glass bottle. Often there's value that's lost through that system. So a glass bottle might become a glass fine, which then goes into a road. So you'd see that it's not always a perfect one for one, but there are items, as you'll see, that are highly recyclable and have a high value as a commodity. And aluminium is one of them. We're really good at recovering metals and they're infinitely recyclable and they hold their value really well. So aluminium cans can be recycled into aluminium cans. You'll see a lot of plastics though, unfortunately, because of the amount that's in our lives, the forms that they take, the different structures that they have, they don't always end up being recycled in the same way. And to say that just because something isn't recycled in our curbside recycling doesn't necessarily mean it's not recyclable. However, as we've said, we only recycle items in our curbside that we have the facilities to manage and that we can safely recover. So just because something is recyclable doesn't mean that we can always recycle it on our curbside. And that's a really important thing to recognize. Ultimately, most things in our lives are recyclable. It's taking one item, processing it and making it into something else. And we've been doing this since we collected newspapers back in the 40s for repackaging, technically recycling it and reusing it into something else. But just because it is recyclable doesn't mean it's recyclable in your yellow or blue bins. So your system in Hunters Hill is a 4-bin system, which is, a leading, Australian system, and it's kind of pretty much replicated in most council areas with a few changes. So if you're not in Hunters Hill, you'd see different areas, or if you go on holidays, you'll see different bins. There's a few tweaks, but in Australian metropolitan cities, most systems replicate a similar sort of process. And that is, we generally have a weekly red bin, because the stuff that goes in the red bin is probably the ickiest stuff, the smelliest stuff, and we recognise that we need to get that off out of our garages and driveways. each week, plus we create quite a bit of it. We have a paper recycling system in Hunters Hill, so you can put paper and cardboard in your blue bins fortnightly, and that enables you to take out really valuable resource for your council and for our communities. Highly recyclable, not always infinitely, but you can put paper and recycling in there. And then you've got a vegetation system, so taking your garden waste, and then a container recycling system or commingled recycling, which will take your plastics and your glass and your milk and juice cartons and jars and other recyclables, which we'll talk about in a second. So everything you create in your house does not necessarily, in terms of waste, does not necessarily end up in these bins, however. We know, for example, there are lots of things we can't put in bins because of the sheer size of them, or because they're dangerous. And we're going to talk a little bit about the big ticket items in terms of danger that shouldn't go in your bins. So just because you've been given 4 bins by council does not mean it should take all waste items that come out of your house. So there are other waste collection items for bulky waste. There's collection for drop off for contaminated and hazardous waste at your community recycling centres. And there are other community recycling initiatives around as well. So that's what you've got. That's the system we're going to work to today. But know that just because you've been given a bin with those labels, not everything in your life is going to fit in them, and nor should you try to make it that way. Important to recognise. Now, in Hunters Hill, in case you're wondering, your paper is picked up, and in fact, all your bins are picked up by URM, or United Resource Management. They are a logistics company that pick up the bin and take it to the factory or the processing or facility where the recyclables go. So your paper goes to Polytrade in Strathfield South, as does your yellow bin, your commingled recyclables. So it goes to a materials recovery facility in Strathfield. Your green garden waste gets picked up by URM and is taken to Suez in Ryde, and where it's processed down into mulch. And then your red bin or your landfill is picked up by URM and taken by Veolia to either their processing facility at Clyde or their processing facility at Woodlawn. Now, in Hunters Hill, you have a biological waste system where you take mixed waste and it's processed down, and the organic waste is actually taken out of your landfill. So there's about a 50% recovery of organics from your landfill at the moment. You'll see other councils moving to other different systems, FOGO or food organics, curbside pickup of food waste. All of those are, potentially available to councils in the future, but at the moment, this is the system you've got. And by the looks of our streets and our neighbourhoods and what we pay for in our communities, it works really well for the needs of our residents at the moment. Is it perfect? No, I don't know a single system in Australia which is perfect, but it is certainly on par with every other council that I know. So I'm not sure if this video is going to work, but I'm hoping it does. This is a really quick example of what happens when contaminants and non-recyclables are taken to your materials recovery facility and processed. So I'm going to try, hopefully, no sound. Here we are. So this is made by Planet Arc, and it's a great little example of what happens when the truck takes your waste to the facility at Strathfield South. So at this particular facility, all of the items are put on the conveyor belt, and staff manually pull off the items which should not be there. And when you watch a video, you'll see a lot that shouldn't be there. So then fans blow the paper items. Now yours will probably be going on a separate stream because you've got a blue bin system anyway. Magnets will take out the metallic items like cans. This is still on the same conveyor belt in the same factory. It's quite a huge system. Optical scanners will use light and scanners to identify shapes and items of whole plastic, and then they will use jets of air to blast those plastic items off the conveyor belt. And then finally, an eddy current will take the aluminium items off the conveyor belt. So you'll be basically left with, at the end of the line, glass, which is then pretty much smashed up by that point in time. And you'll see that you'll end up with about 5 or 6 streams just from one facility. Now you can imagine the noise, the smell, all sorts of things going on in this facility. It really is a scale of human consumption which kind of beggars belief, but what an amazing system. And the reason that we sort our waste at home in certain ways is so that that system has the best possible chance of success. So all of the things I'm going to tell you today about waste and recycling tips is to make it the best possible opportunity for the staff and the facilities and the machines at our recycling facility to get those items off the conveyor belt. So when you kind of go, well, why do they do it that way? It should be this way. That's what we're coming back to. We're working to the system we've got. Again, not perfect, but pretty good. And certainly, you know, as the systems develop and change over time, it may change, but at the moment, that's what we're working towards. So the most important thing I say when talking to anyone about their recyclables is that it really comes back to recognizing within your home where you create waste, setting up a system so that you can best store it until it goes in the bin, and also making it easy for everyone else in your family to do the same thing. So it's about spotting it, storing it, and signing it, and then putting it in your bin. So many times we have contamination in the bins because people are frustrated by the stinky waste that's sitting there and they don't have an appropriate place for it. And so they just go, I just need it out of my life, and they'll jam it in whatever bin they've got. And that if the red bin fills up, then they'll jam it in whatever other bin they've got. And you'll see it in apartment blocks and multi-unit dwellings a lot, where people kind of get frustrated with it. They can't fit all the things that they have in certain places. So a lot of what we talk about in the home is creating spaces where you can actually put waste that's not going to smell, that's not going to be disgusting, that's going to enable you to hold it until such point you can move it to the appropriate location. Now, in COVID, that's been really tricky because a lot of us have mountains of cans suddenly that we want to take to return and earn, or, you know, bundles and bundles of clothes that we want to take to our local charity shop. So it's certainly highlighted how important having appropriate spaces for this waste is, and also that we really need to frequently remove these items. I'm saying that as I'm in my garage with a lot of stuff around me that I need to move on. So really, when we look at the sorts of waste in the areas we have and the places in our house where we have bins, I would, you know, I always like people to think about where most of their waste is created. And the vast majority of our waste in our houses is created in our kitchens. Not a surprise to anyone, but that's where all our food waste is going. That's where most of our packaging is coming from. Bottles, wine, beer, you know, that's where the majority of our cleaning product waste will end up. Within our bathrooms, we end up with a lot more medical or sanitary waste, you know, hygiene products, but we do have some recyclables that can end up there, toilet paper rolls, those sorts of things. Home office is mostly e-waste, printer cartridges, paper, old appliances, light bulbs, and the laundry, you might, you know, end up with some old textile waste, again, some medical or cleaning product waste, and perhaps nappies. So it's important to recognise that they're probably the big four, and the other two areas of the house where we generally create waste is our garage, so old paints, tools, broken things, stuff you don't know what else to do with until it's gone. And then in the garden, you might end up with your vegetative waste, so your compostables or your prunings or your clippings or your mulch or, you know, animal waste, those sorts of things. So it's important to recognize when you're setting up a bin in your house, setting it up in the place where the bin, where the waste is created. And it's important also to recognize that within the kitchen of our home, that is where the vast majority of our sorting is going to be. Now, if you're setting up a bin, and you can think about maybe an office you've worked in or a place you've been before, if you set up one bin and then you expect the sorting to happen when you get to the bin, there's a lot less chance that the sorting is going to happen correctly. You're either going to get an overzealous partner or child or family member or cleaner who comes in and just empties it because I cannot be bothered sorting through the now smelly waste that's here. And by this point, it's disgusting. So we really need to set up systems which allow us to sort the waste when it's created. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples. Now, these are real resident examples. I put out a call to some of the community members around to show what they do in their households. This is an example of a wonderful community member who has set up a bin system within their pantry that is signposted and labelled, has collected some slightly smaller items as well, but it's enabled their family to identify and sort items in the kitchen as quickly as possible so that it avoids that kind of challenge of putting things in the wrong bin. Now, I would say that my preference and what I recommend to families is that if you can have your waste as close to the kitchen sink as possible, that encourages a really healthy behaviour with recycling, which is cleaning your recyclables enough so that they have those icky things, which can be in jars or in plastic bottles, removed. So we'll talk about why that's important in a second. But rinsing your recyclables is helpful. They do not have to be spotless by any means, but if you're rinsing an item and you can put it straight into the bin from there, that's great. I'd also say that having a space that's not too big so that it just becomes out of control by the time you have to move it, or smelly, is really important too. So setting up a bin system in your home that allows you to sort where the waste is created is critical. If you wait to get to your bin to sort it, you are relying on human error and you're relying on the goodness of the person emptying it. And if you're with flatmates or other people who don't care about recycling, you can bet your money it's not going to happen. So sort where you can. And obviously this requires space, which is often a luxury within our homes. But again, if you can set up a system that enables this to be done, it will save you a lot of headaches. So this is an example of my home and the bin systems that I've set up in the various areas of my house. So in the top left-hand corner is my underbin waste system. Now I have 5 separate bins in that area, 2 for compostables because we create quite a bit of our waste that we put in our home composting, 1 for landfill, so just those bits that cannot be recycled, 1 for recyclables, and I actually have 1 for laundry items that need to go downstairs because we use a lot of tea towels and cloths. So that's a system that works for my family. It's under the sink, it's out of the way. I empty it every day still because it does get to a point that I can't manage. If it's after a couple of days, it does start to feel like it's becoming the waste monster. But I also have recognized that within other areas of my house, it's really important to have places for things. So I have a top drawer in my kitchen where I put items like bread tags, which my kids have been using for craft, but I also can drop off to other places. Small recyclable items which can't go in my recycling bin, but can be used for other things like lids. I keep the little silica packets from food when it comes through, and I use them for other things. So it's enabled me to set up my own little sorting system in the top drawer, which again is nice and convenient as well. In my garage, I've set up areas for clothes because I've got 2 boys who are 4 years apart. So I have this 2-year gap where neither of them fit into the clothes. So I've got about 7 buckets where I put hand-me-down clothes in. I've got a space for e-waste where I can put old batteries, broken appliances. And on the back of a separate door, I keep my soft plastic waste. And the reason I've separated that from my other waste under my sink is that I was finding that the soft plastics were making them way into other areas. People thought it was waste, so they just put it in the main bin. Or, so I now make a point of putting my soft plastics items, which I take back to the supermarket, in a completely separate area. Again, that works for my family. You need to work out what works for yours. And the other bag of clothes I have is items for charity, or items which are no good for charity, which I then take to maybe H&M or to the yarn in Hunters Hill, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So this works for my family. In my bathroom, I have one small bin, and I take the recyclables to the kitchen to put in. Again, that works for my family, but it's important to recognise that separate bin systems encourage separate behaviours, and if you can sort at the point of creation, that is best practice. I will just say a thing about, before we get into those 5 waste rules and a few tips to give you some confidence with recycling, is about labels. Now, everyone gets really, really hung up on labels when it comes to recycling, and I'm going to ask you to try and forget them. Waste labels are very confusing. There are hundreds of them in Australia. It is not regulated, and those little arrows and that little Mobius symbol that you see on your items are great for manufacturers and processors of waste, but they do not help you, because ultimately the numbers on your packages tell you what it's made out of, but it doesn't tell you always exactly which bin to go in. And ultimately, some products we have are made of 3 different or 4 different types of items within it. It might be paper, plastic, metal, you know, it gets too complex. And after years of talking to people about this, I've recognized that numbers are not everyone's bag and it does not work. So I'm going to ask you to not worry so much about what number is. Is it a 1 or is it a 3 or is it, can I put it in, oh, it's a 5? Don't worry about the numbers, because I'm going to give you these other rules. And if you follow those other rules, the numbers won't be as important. The label I would like you to find and think about, and I, of course, don't have an item with one on it at the moment, but is the Australasian recycling label. Now that is created by Planet Arc, and you'll see it there. It's the black and white label that does have that Mobius symbol on it, but it's really giving you very specific actions related to each item of that packaging. So it will tell you which bits can go in your recycling, which bits go back to the store, it's a red cycle, your shopping centre, which bits have to go in the bin, and it'll break it down. And it is a nationalised symbol. It is linked with industry in Australia, and it is a much more reliable system that's Australian relevant. So the other thing that's really useful to look for on your packaging is whether it has post-consumer content in it or recycled content in the packaging. If you see that, give yourself a little shout, because that's what you want to be purchasing. We want to be starting to buy products which have recycled content in it, because ultimately that helps that system, and it's what helps recycling be successful in Australia. Buying recycled content, buying recycled paper, buying you know, packaging that has recycled plastic in it is very, very good, because it ultimately supports that system. Why recycle if we're not going to use recycled content? Why recycle if we're going to buy virgin plastic or virgin glass? So if a producer of a product is telling you they're using recycled content, give them some love. If they're not, send them a little message and say, hey, we'd love to see you use recycled content in your products. There isn't always price parity, but it's certainly getting better. And that's really the sort of change we need to see across all the industries. So, all right, here's the 5 rules, which hopefully will help you a little bit. So recycling is for containers and packaging from the kitchen, laundry and bathroom. Generally, items which come out of other areas of your house, not going to be as recyclable. So most stuff that comes out of your garage, you're going to be entering into a bit of a grey area. A lot of the packaging you'll start to see, you know, containers which are a bit strained, a bit heavier, you know, maybe you've got something quite toxic in it. So stick to what recycling was designed for, which is really recyclable containers out of those kitchen, laundry and bathroom. It really is about containers ultimately, and about what products have come in. So that is kind of your basic starting point. The second rule is that it needs to be empty, loose and clean. Now, when I say clean, it doesn't have to be scrubbed. It doesn't have to be so clean that you could eat out of it. It just needs to be have large amounts of residue removed. So you don't want your tomato paste jar that's still got large chunks of tomato paste at the bottom. Put some water in there, shake it up, empty that out. And if it's mostly clear, you're on a winner. If you really want to wash your recyclables in your dishwasher, some people like doing that, and I appreciate it. It does make for a much cleaner bin, but it is not essential. A simple rinse out with some water to get the big chunks out of it will help. Now, the reason we need contaminants out of our recyclables is because you can imagine if you've gone through the process of putting a glass jar into your bin, which is covered in peanut butter, and it's gone through the truck and onto the facility, and it's crushed down because it's glass. And by the time it's got to the end of the line, you've got pieces of glass and peanut butter smashed together, and it's gone to the recycling facility. Suddenly that item becomes a lot harder to process. It may still get there, but the quality of that product is so much less. So what we had in Australia is a situation where the level of contamination of our products was stopping countries like China accepting our recyclables. Again, should we be shipping our recyclables overseas? No, we shouldn't. But so that's now stopped. But we certainly have this problem that we created a level of contamination which was unacceptable for the industry. So we need to do our bit and remove that ick factor. It will certainly help you managing your smell in your bin as well. When I say it needs to be loose, that's when I come back to this. If you put your recyclables in a container, plastic bag, and you pull the plastic bag out of your bin, make sure you empty the recyclables into the bin and you take your plastic bag with you. Bagged recyclables, if you tie them up and throw them in your bin, will not make it past that first step in the recycle process. It will be pulled straight off the conveyor belt by the staff at the facility, thrown into the bin, and everything inside that plastic bag is going to landfill. Don't waste your time. You may as well put it straight in your red bin. Do not bag your recyclables. Do not tie a bow in it. Shake them out. Take the plastic bag with you. Either get rid of the plastic bag into your red bin or reuse it. It does not play any part into your yellow bin or your blue bin for that matter. And the reason for that is you can imagine the staff at a recycling facility, what they deal with. I've heard staff have to pick up dead animals, clotheslines, prams, rolls of paper, which are twice as long as any of them. Items which are so ridiculously not fit for purpose that health and safety becomes a huge risk for them. They don't know what's in this bag. They do not have time to tear open this bag. There is no system at the facility to tear open this bag. They have millions of tons of waste coming in a day. There's no time for this. So just make it easier for them. As soon as you shake it, the eddy current can work, the air blowers can work, the fans can blow, and they can suddenly make it work. As soon as you mash them up together and stop those items being single items on the conveyor belt, you create problems. The other issue is that recyclables in plastic bags get stuck in all of the machinery of the conveyor belt. So most materials recycling facilities have to shut down for a couple of hours a day or an hour, and someone actually has to get in there and manually rip out all the plastic bags which have jammed up the machinery. So we're creating another problem and adding a lot more cost to our waste services by doing that. The last thing with empty items is that we saw that the plastic items get blown off the conveyor belt by jets of air. If we've got a full glass of water, a full bottle of water with a lid on it, the item won't be able to be blown off. It'll have too much weight. So make sure when you're putting a can of drink or a plastic bottle or a milk bottle that it's empty. It shouldn't have a centimetre of liquid at the bottom. Just make sure it's completely empty before you put it in. Hopefully that one made all sense for recycling rule 2. The third recycling rule is that it needs to be whole. So if you shred an item to a point that it is into small pieces, it's no longer going to work in the same system. So shredded paper in a recycling bin will not make it through. It will fall through immediately. You're basically just creating snow for the floor of the facility. Don't bother. Don't put it in there. and it's best for your compost once it's shredded. If it's a piece of cardboard or something, you don't need to rip it up into small pieces, keep it whole. And ultimately, containers like this, there's no need to squash it down so that it's completely flat. Again, some compaction, like perhaps with your milk bottle, is okay. But really, when that scanner, the UV scanner, goes across the line, it's actually looking for that outline, exactly like in your return and earn system when you put it in the reverse vending machine. It's actually scanning for the shape. So we're actually doing ourselves a disservice if we're squashing every item in our recycling bin within an inch of its life. I know that we are sometimes stuck for space, but try to keep things as whole as possible. The trucks will compact it a bit, but they are designed not to compact it so that it's dead flat. So do yourself a favor, keep things as whole as possible, and that will also help that process. Now this is really important. It's probably one of the most important things. There are certain things when they go in the recycling bin are incredibly dangerous. Now we talked about plastic bags. They are actually a safety issue. Other things which shouldn't go in because they're not recyclable in our systems, but anything that is long and tangleable, I think that's the word, is going to cause massive issues. So even if something's made out of paper and it's a big long piece, you can bet that it's going to get tangled. So think about how safe it's going to be for people working in that factory. And the number one hazard for recycling in Australia is these guys. Please do not put them in your yellow bins or in your red bins. They are processable at recycling facilities, but in not the facilities in your curbside. There's a reason that we collect these items in our community recycling facilities and you know, at our collection or office works, or you know, there's a reason we take them back, and there's a couple of reasons. One is that they leach acid, they've got chemicals in them, you know, they are dangerous for the environment, but they also, batteries in our trucks cause fires. You probably hear every now and then that there was a fire in a truck, and I think it was Liverpool Council lost a huge number of trucks and you know, caused a lot of problems for their waste services. Batteries can do immense damage, so please keep them out of your bins. Same for gas canisters, anything that is toxic or has a chemical in there which is not from your kitchen, laundry or bathroom. We've got to think about not only the safety of us as a community when this is sitting in landfill or in recycling, but the staff who work in recycling facilities as well as our council staff and our collectors of waste as well. So please think about safety. If something's broken, glass, for example, a glass jar, and you throw it in the bin and then you think, oh, it's smashed, what do I do? And I've had people go, oh, I had to empty it all out. This is highly recyclable. It's going to get in that truck. It's going to be emptied. It's going to be emptied onto the conveyor belt. It is going to break. It is very rare that it'll get to the end of the line and won't smash. That is okay. But please don't put drinking glasses in your recyclables. A very different product. I know it's very confusing. But broken glass and mostly in the kitchen, it's going to be wine glasses or drinking glasses. They're tempered at a different temperature. They don't behave in the same way. We want the glass that's from our bottles, drinking bottles and jars, not the glass that's been, you know, tempered to withhold a lot different heat. And same for crockery. So, but don't worry so much about glass other than your own fingers when you're putting things in the recyclable. It will break, and that is okay. All right, now this one's hard for people to hear sometimes, but how many times have we stood in front of a bin and we've gone, don't know if it's recyclable or not, I'm going to just have a go. If you're doing that, please don't. The benefit that you would provide by putting it in there, the hope, you know, at best, maybe it's 30%, it's going to get there. Please keep that item, find out, and if you're still unsure, put it in your red bin. Because the problem is we spend a lot of time recycling now. We do our best, we hope for our best, and we don't get any feedback really unless we have a bin audit, actually not recyclable. So if you're concerned and you're thinking, oh, but it says it's recyclable, but I just don't know, find out as best you can, but don't wish cycle. Don't put it in there with the vain hope that it's going to go. I would prefer that it went to landfill, then went to a recycling facility, made a mess of what's going on there, and then went to landfill. Just remember that there are often other alternatives for these items as well. So it might be that it's not a curbside recyclable, but it is recyclable somewhere else in the community. All right, I'm going to cover a couple more items in a sec, but here's a couple of tips which have really helped me over the years. First of all, when it comes to plastics, we see a lot of questions about which of these is really recyclable. And it comes down to obviously what it's made out of, but also how it behaves through the process. So items which you can't scrunch, like these, or you do scrunch and it kind of bounces back, great. A great recyclable, well done. An item which sort of bounces back, a little bit more questionable, but most most places will take strawberry punnets, those sorts of things. The problem with these, they are so lightweight that they don't always behave exactly as they want them to. In theory, if you can stack a few of them together, you might have a bit more luck. There's no one that's ever been able to say to me, you know what, 100% this is going to make it through. This is a little bit of those, should I not? My best advice is to avoid buying things that have this. In theory, yes, recyclable and should make it. Once you get to an item that is completely scrunchable and does not form its shape again, 100% do not put it in the bin. It is not going to make it. It is a soft plastic that should go into landfill or in your red cycle. So that's the scrunch test. If you can scrunch it and it bounces back, it's technically a recyclable plastic. The tear test is a really handy one for paper. So if you've got something that looks very much like paper, but you're not sure because you know how many things have plastic coatings, give it a tear. And if you can't, or if you start to see at the side that there is plastic on there, then put it in the landfill bin. So really your blue bin is for paper and cardboard. And that goes for these guys as well. Not recyclable, plastic lining throughout, bonded very heavily, almost impossible in our curbside recycling facilities to recycle. Avoid them if you can. I know it's hard during COVID. Use a reusable cup, but also put it into landfill, please. And the final one is anything smaller than your fist, unless you've got a huge fist, is not going to make it through the system. So if you go to the bin and you're sprinkling lids and little business cards and tiny pieces of shredded paper or anything really small, even small metal lids, it's not going to get there. It's going to fall through the system. You saw the conveyor belt, it won't make it. So if it's smaller than your fist, it either needs to be inside another container to make it through. And the example is a tin can, aluminium can. So the lid here may not make it. Put it inside, crush that up and put that in. It's got a much better chance. If you put like with like, so plastic with plastic, metal with metal, you've got a much better chance of smaller items making it through. Same for aluminium. Wait till you've got enough that it's sort of big enough like this, and that can go into the bin. This is aluminium foil, highly recyclable, but not in small pieces. So come Easter time, make the big ball with all the Easter eggs and then throw it in and keep it together like that. All right, there are our little hacks. I'm going to cover a couple more items and then we're going to take some questions from you all. I know you've got there. Organics, they don't go in any of these bins. People sometimes throw in, a bit of fruit and, keep them out of your yellow and blue bins. you know, keep your garden waste for your green bins, keep your bagged plastic items, which we've covered, single-use plastic items, plastic forks and spoons. 1, they're too small to go through. 2, they're not going to make it through the system with the scanners we've got, so do not put them in there. Textiles, again, a really nasty one for our recyclers because they get tangled again. They don't belong in our yellow bins. Take them to a charity shop if they're in a wearable, and I mean really wearable condition. Otherwise, they need to go to a textile bin like King Cotton, some of those that are around the area, or at the yarn, there's a textile drop office there for items that aren't wearable, but clean. Please make them clean. All right, I think that's the main, they're the top 7 big contaminants when it comes to what we see in our, oh, the other one, polystyrene. Please don't put polystyrene in your yellow bin. It is a recyclable product. It's a really nasty product. So most people are recognizing that polystyrene doesn't have a place in our future planet. But please keep the polystyrene out of your yellow bin. Avoid polystyrene. If you're getting products with polystyrene in them these days, it is worth checking. It's worth running them underwater if you've got packing peanuts in your deliveries, because most of them are now made out of cornstarch. So if you get a whole bunch and you open it and you go, oh, they've put polystyrene in, just check it, because often now they're cornstarch based, thank goodness. But polystyrene has to go in our red bin. It's just not processed. It is such a cheap thing that has very little market value. And really, it's just a nightmare. And you can imagine the white snow of polystyrene flowing through the facility. So try to avoid that. All right. I have a couple of things I was just going to say is that a lot of people ask me how to get kids involved in recycling. And I will say, I'm just going to skip over this because I know we're running quite in time. The best thing you can do for kids to get involved in recycling is to model the behaviours you want to see and make it fun. I think it's a lot harder to get adults involved in recycling than it is kids, my personal experience. You know, I think try and model the behaviour. And again, it's when they get to the bin that you want them to start thinking about what they can do. But I've seen daycare centres and schools do some of the most amazing things when it comes to this. So there's a million ideas out there you can tap into. I'm just going to put this up while I answer some of the questions. This is the yarn at 64 Gladesville Road. You can drop off hard to manage items there that are normally not recyclable anywhere else. You can also drop off, you know, e-waste, batteries, paint and chemicals to your community recycling facility in our Tarman. All the information about this is on the website, and I'll show you a link in a second at Hunters Hill. But I'm going to jump over.
Just breaking in there for a second. I don't think the yarn's actually open yet,
it's not,
but it will be.
No,
yeah, when it reopens, when we're allowed to reopen it again.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I think the community recycling facility are reopened again now, but worth checking again.
Yeah. And I think the return and earn at Henley's, I think, open now.
Yes,
but
recently I've seen
a lot of things have been closed. Yeah,
absolutely. And so we're all struggling a little bit with drowning in that waste. But yes, so your 3 biggest friends outside of your curbside waste is, you know, your curbside collection, which you can book for a year in Hunters Hill. Any community recycling facilities like, you know, the one at Artarmon and the one in Gladesville. And also your return and earn facility where you can drop off all your cans and bottles, which you are already paying your 10 cents for when you purchase those products. So you may as well get that money back. Okay, I'm going to get to your questions. Hopefully I can cover those. Can I put container lids in the yellow bin? Milk container lids. So these come around the fist test, they're just going to go and fall through. So they either need to be on your bottle, which is what I'd recommend. There's all this contention about whether it's not the right lid for the right bottle, but keep it on there. Again, it's got more of a chance of making it through there. There's talk about whether they would fly off and hurt people and stuff, but yeah, so if you're going to do anything with them, that's a great opportunity. Keep plastic with the plastic. There are collections of lids from various places. And you can, if you want to, like I do, I try to keep them separate because I use them for other things with my kids. But ultimately, they need to stay on your bottle. And if you just throw them in there loose, they won't make it, so don't bother. Foil, yes, I think we've covered that. Do you have to clean the foil? Again, if it's got big chunks of anything on it, like if you bake something and it's got, you know, big chunks of stuff, give it a bit of a clean. If you think it's just a lost cause, again, if in doubt, leave it out. But if it's just got a little bit of stuff, it's okay. And pizza boxes are the perfect example. If you've got a bit of grease, you kind of just use your judgment. The processes they put these products through are pretty intense. So they are going to be able to glean out a bit of grease and a bit of, you know, but we just want to keep the percentage of contaminants low, which is our job. Sticky tape in the paper bin. Yeah, so if you've got a bit of sticky tape on a letter, or if you've got a letter with a plastic envelope on it, a plastic window, sorry, the bills ones, again, they're fine. So a little bit of contamination is natural. It's going to happen. That is okay. So sticky tape, again, yes, that's fine. Awesome. A plug for Hunters Hill Scout Group, taking return and earn bottles. Brilliant. There's an opportunity for you to drop off and donate those. Thank you, Kathy. Red tags and rubber bands. Yeah, that's they're one of those things that if you do nothing else with them, they just need to go into your red bin. But there are red tags collections available. You can drop them off at the yarn once it's open again. There are charities that are taking the items. Look, we're ultimately going to see these phased out. They're already transitioning to cardboard. They should never have been invented. They're horrible things. So unless you want to keep them for a beautiful artwork, really, they're a redundant item that hopefully we'll never see again in the future. What do I use the silica packets for? So the two things I found them good for. When I drop my phone and I get water and I put them in, instead of rice, I could put them with the silica, because they're very absorbent. And the other thing is I put them around areas of my house where I've got damp issues. So in my wardrobe, I've got a big little container at the back of my shoes. So that's what I've been doing with them. Seems to work so far. Saves me getting odor eaters and stuff. Plastic bottle lids. Yeah, I've been using them for craft and a few other projects. There are some great projects all around. I don't know if any. I think the Happy Hens at Henley have been collecting some community recyclable items, which you can check out on their website as well. So there are items that there are places that will take them, but when it comes to putting them in your recycling bin, it's a no. Do I keep lids or jars on tomato puree? Yeah, so metal lids on glass bottles, ultimately what's going to happen is either it's going to get to the end of the line where it's still on the glass and go to the glass manufacturer, and they're not going to want the metal, so it's probably going to end up in landfill, or it's going to break off because the glass smashes, and that small piece, it might make it through, but it's quite small. So you can do a number of things. You can put the metal lids inside another metal can, or if they're large enough, they will make it through. So it's one of those tricky ones. If it's a really small lid, and I'm thinking like caper bottle lids or bottle tops from beers, it really needs to go inside another can. Again, not perfect system, but it gives it more of a chance of getting through. Yellow bins filled with plastic bags. How do we educate everyone? Well, look, I agree. It is the #1 contaminant. 50% of people are still putting those plastic bags in our bins. My attitude is that I just try and do the best I can. If I see it, you know, and I know the person, you can have a chat with them. People don't really respond very well to random people coming up and educating them about their recycling. I've tried and it does not work, as you some of you are probably aware. Okay, thank you, Kathy. So yeah, look, this is the challenge we have in our communities. How do we make people want to be involved? And my attitude is that we need to be as positive and encouraging of people doing the right things, and really get as involved as we can with, you know, community activities that encourage behaviour change as well. So yeah, it's why council are investing in what they're doing now, but it is a really hard message. And you'll see those no plastic bag stickers across our bins in Hunters Hill as well. It is really hard for people to understand that they can put bagged recyclables in their red bin, but not bagged recyclables in their yellow bins. So it is just that shift and understanding that it won't get there. Kathy's just said that our Tarman Recycling Centre is still saying it's temporarily closed, which is sad. So hopefully that won't be for too much longer. Okay, should we kill nut milk cartons whole? And I'm assuming that's a Tetra Pak, Rachel. So they generally do squash down pretty, fairly quickly within that system. So it's okay. I think I wouldn't need to flatten them now. The only reason you flatten any recyclables is to create space in your bin. You're not helping anyone at the other end. So if you need to squash things down a bit, okay, but don't do it just because you think it helps the other end. So I hope that helps a little bit, but I know exactly the ones you're talking about. Okay. I think we've hit a silence, which generally makes me think people are either overwhelmed or they can't think of any more things to worry about. So this is the council website. There's a really great A to Z there of all the things where you can put them. So if you've got questions like, oh, I've got this, item I have no idea what to do with, it might be on the list, so you can go and have a look. Can juice cartons go in the yellow bin? Plastic juice cartons or Tetra Pak, Patricia? I'll answer both. Yes, they can into the yellow bin. Juice carton. So Tetra Pak is a combination of paper, plastic, and metal. So it's a nightmare, but we do manage to recycle it. Poppers can go into your return and earn RVM. So collect those if you're doing poppers for kids or juice boxes or whatever people call them. But yes, Tetra Pak can go in your yellow bin, and plastic juice bottles can also go in your yellow bin. Tea bags. Tea bags do not go in yellow or blue bins. They should go in your landfill bin or in your home composting, because they've got tea, which is an organic product, and the tea bag itself often has a plastic element in it, believe it or not. So yeah, home composting. Shout out if you haven't heard of share waste before and you don't want to compost at home, you might be able to find a local compost host, so you can go and put your compost in their bin. I've got quite a few neighbours who come put compost in my bin. Otherwise it's into your red bin. All right. I feel like I've gone over a little bit, but it's been really lovely to have you all with me today for this Lunch and Learn. If you're really interested in this sort of stuff or know someone else who could learn a little bit more, we've got another session next week, which is on the council website, the events website. Next week, we're talking about the circular economy and what that means and how recycling fits into that. So it's sort of the next piece of the puzzle for Australia and for our area as well. So I'd love to see you there. And it's been my great pleasure to join Hunters Hill Council, and thank you so much for having me. If you've got any further questions, you can contact the waste team at Hunters Hill Council, and you can reach out. There's a lot of resources on the website through this QR code. So thank you
so much, Jo. That was fabulous. Thank you. I think everyone will agree that was an incredibly enlightening, actually. It was fabulous. I also want to say that we've got, as well as Jo's workshops on sustainability, which there's 4 in total, and you can go to huntershill.nsw.gov.au/events. They're all listed there. And again, like this, you can go through to get your registration via Eventbrite. We also have some gardening ones coming up. There's one on the 5th of October. There's actually on composting. So Meredith from Easy Care Gardening is going to be doing a workshop on composting. So that should be really, really good for people who are interested in taking all their composting further. So thank you, Jo. Thank you, everyone that turned up. It's fabulous to see you here, and hope you being healthy and happy and sustainable during lockdown.
Great. And Gabby, I'll send you the recording. If anyone wants to share this with anyone that they know might be interested, they can share the link as well. When they get it. So,
and I'll see if I can stick it up on the website or something as well.
Great. Excellent.
Yeah. So thank you. And Jo, we'll see you for the next one.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Okay. Bye.